So in many people's eyes, South Africa has the most developed tech startup and venture capital ecosystem
Sure.
on the continent.
Sure.
That's the one aspect. Second aspect is that you have the ecosystem that you were talking about earlier on, the pitching competitions, the accelerators. You've also got the venture builders. You've also got an element of enterprise supply development where corporates are helping to incubate, certain businesses, startups. Where's the lack?
Where's that lack?
Where's the lack exactly?
Yeah,
because it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity. It sounds like there's a lot of money floating around. It sounds like, and based on a couple of the capital raises, that I've been, covering of late, I think just the other day we had Pay Me Now has just bought out, another fintech company recently. So there's a lot of activity in the space. Plus, before we even go anywhere, there's the internet as well.
The great equalizer.
So talk to us. What is the actual lack of knowledge?
Sure.
What are the practical things that are being gained from these one-on-one relationships? What are these intangibles? Especially for someone who doesn't sit on one of these groups or who's not interacting with founders on a daily basis. And they're like, no, listen, I can just go Google this stuff. Or I'm going to go be part of an accelerator and I'll learn this stuff. Like, what are those intangibles that they're not getting?
Sure. Man, my mind is racing as you're speaking because there's just so many, you touched on so many important things. So I think one thing that's worth noting is that in our ecosystem, there's a lot of first-time founders, right? So what that means is that you've never built a business before. And for a lot of them, they're the first entrepreneurs within their family, especially if you're part of our community. Typically, you're a first-time founder. So what that means is that there's a lot of things that you just don't know. And the interesting thing about the journey of building a startup is that a lot of the things that you should be doing at the early stages are actually very counterintuitive, right? To common business advice you might get from a business advisor who's only worked with advising established businesses, right? To give you an example of one of these counterintuitive things is that in the beginning, you have to actively be engaging in activities that don't scale, right? What do I mean by that? You have to be doing unscalable things. You have to be talking to users. As the founder, you have to be signing up your first customers.
Yes.
Things that you can't scale because you have to hire for it and things like that. So there's very few people in our ecosystem who know that counterintuitive advice. And the only way you know it is if you've actually built something before.
Yeah.
Because you've learned through the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Right. So what we're seeing in our ecosystem is that although there's an abundance of people who are sharing startup knowledge, very few of them are qualified to do that because they haven't actually built anything.
Yeah.
So oftentimes the advice they give you is the textbook advice that's actually more applicable to more mature business. And it's very harmful, actually, because now you've got founders that are focusing on the wrong things at the wrong stage of their business. So there's a very big knowledge gap, right? And within our universe of Darkies and tech, we've identified different access gaps. So the first is access to knowledge. What we don't mean is there's not enough literature on startups, but what we're saying is there's not enough contextually relevant, localized knowledge from builders, real people who know what it's like to be in the ring. And that's part of what makes us unique is that, one, I'm a builder, right? And that's why I've been allowed to convene the community in this way because my members trust me because I've been there before.
Yeah.
So if you look at a lot of the program providers, you'll find corporates, well-meaning at times, but they'll find the wrong people giving this information to startups. And then these startups have a lot more to unlearn than they have to learn, which is a huge challenge we're experiencing in the ecosystem. Startups that feel overtrained, but when you really test their knowledge of, do you know what it takes to actually build a successful company from 0 to 1? A lot of them don't actually know that. So that's the access to knowledge gap. Then there's access to capital. So to your point, it seems like there's just an abundance of capital floating around the ecosystem. So one of my major critiques about the ecosystem is that it's exactly that. The capital floats around the entrepreneur, but it never lands in the entrepreneur's bank, right? So the people who are getting the money in the ecosystem are the program providers and everyone else besides the entrepreneur, the service providers, the coaches. Everyone seems to be somehow finding this money, right? But then the entrepreneur is invited into spaces where they have to share their story and they're the only person in the room not getting paid. So there's a lot of what I call opportunity distractions in the ecosystem.
Mm.
So these are distractions disguised as opportunities. Hey, come and, tell us about your journey. Maybe you'll be somebody in the room. That kind of thing. And then oftentimes entrepreneurs are pulled in different directions because, of course, naturally they want to get awareness out there about what they're building. But sometimes those opportunities don't actually materialize into real opportunities. So I call them opportunity distractions. And there's a whole lot of that in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to somehow find ways of getting that money into the hands of entrepreneurs. Right. And I think that that's where there's a deficit. Now, it's interesting because you might be thinking, well, Ntsako, I go to a lot of these events and I see these Black entrepreneurs there. So what do you mean they're not actually accessing the capital? But what I mean by that is that although there are Black bodies in these events and in these ecosystem stuff, a lot of the times the beneficiaries of the real opportunities are not us. So we're there because we want to learn and we want to equip ourselves, but the deals are not actually being done in those spaces. They're being done elsewhere, over braais, over gatherings.
Yes.
This is where the deals are really being done.
Yeah.
So one would be forgiven for thinking, but our people are participating. Well, not participating in the opportunity of the tech ecosystem. And that's something that we're looking to change as Darkies in Tech. And that's the access to capital gap, right? Then there's the access to talent. And this one is loaded. There's a whole number of reasons why this is loaded. But typically, if you look at the composition of a startup, the team that the founder builds, a lot of the time that team looks like the founder, right? If you look at a white-owned startup, maybe there'll be diversity of talent.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of things that go into that. Trust. Do we think that this is a good leader? There's a lot of assumptions people make. But oftentimes I've noticed when the founder is Black and there isn't a white co-founder, they only pretty much employ Black people. And that's not always by design. Sometimes it's by who will trust you with their career and their journey.
Yeah.
It's very loaded.
Yeah, it is.
So we're trying to figure out how do we then start to showcase and demystify Black leadership, that a Black founder
can do it.
And that even as a white developer, you can trust them to work with them to help them to build this business and to achieve that mission.